Hello everybody and welcome to the Recruitment Revolution podcast by KD Recruitment. My name is Kelly Dunn and I'm the Director of KD Recruitment here in North Yorkshire. I am joined today by Michelle Mook of Pro Development. Hi Michelle.
Hi Kelly. Nice
How are
to see you. I'm good, thank you. You?
Yes, very well, thank you. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do at Pro Development?
Yes, so I'm the Managing Director of Pro Development. We were founded 13 years ago, working with SMEs primarily around Yorkshire and the Humber, helping them with employee engagement and retention, which is a big issue at the moment.
Yes, massive, and we're going to come on to some of that later. So thank you, Michelle. And I'm also joined by Marie Horner from whole.Legal. Hi, Marie.
Morning, Kelly. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and whole.Legal and what they do?
So I'm an employment lawyer. I've been an employment lawyer for over 20 years now, and I work for whole.Legal, and we're a small team of business legal service focused lawyers providing legal advice on a subscription basis, a bit like your in-house counsel, but with a number of specialists working externally.
Perfect. So today's session, we're going to discuss a number of different things, but I think one of the key topics that's hot on the agenda for all our clients at the moment is flexible working, hybrid working, time at home, employee engagement. And I think these are really, really key topics at the moment that I'm hearing about. And I think I wanted to start our discussions today with one of the problems that one of my clients has faced recently. So we've gone through a piece of recruitment for a senior role with a business. The hiring manager hadn't discussed flexible working or hybrid working as part of the opportunity. The candidate that he wanted to offer the job to assumed that there would be flexible hybrid working. And I think this is one of the conversations that we're having with businesses more and more on a daily basis. Businesses want their employees in the office, and then the employees are wanting an element of flexibility and hybrid working. So I think I wanted us today to discuss sort of the pros and cons and kind of what's happening at the moment around the flexibility and hybrid working, because I feel like business leaders are on one page and then the employees are on a different page at the moment, and there seems to be a little bit of sticking ground there. What do you feel, Michelle?
Yeah, it's funny actually, I was having a very similar conversation with a managing director yesterday. They're struggling because, well, they've kind of done that whole, we want everybody back in the office. They're kind of being flexible in their view, in that they're allowing flexibility for dental appointments and hospital appointments and things like that, but they're not doing this kind of idea of being able to work from home when it's needed. And they're getting a massive backlash from their employees. And I think there's no surprise really, is there? You know, people, when you look at the research now, there was a great report done by McKinsey last year, and it was looking at the reason why people are leaving businesses. And of course, what we often hear from business owners is, well, they've left for more money or better opportunities. But actually, the reality is very different. And one of the areas that was highlighted was lack of flexibility. So people will leave if they haven't got that flexibility. It's something that I think definitely the younger generation are really looking for, that work-life balance. But I think we all are now. And I think COVID obviously highlighted that for us all, didn't it? The importance. I always remember being on a call with a lawyer actually who said, do you know what? I've managed to read to my child every night this week, and I've never been able to do that before. And it's those sorts of things, isn't it, when people have got that flexibility, it just allows them to do those things that are really important. But yeah, it's a real problem because a lot of companies are kind of flipping it now and saying we want them back. And I think it's a mistake, because you'll struggle to recruit, as you'll know as well, and you'll struggle to retain your talent. And I think that balance, it's got to be flexible, because the other problem we've seen is companies saying, right, everybody has to do 2 days a week at home. that equally might not suit some people, because some people like being in the office. So it's being flexible and allowing people to work in a way that best suits them, but of course it meets the needs of the business. Ultimately, that's also just as important.
Yes, and I think one of the things that I'm hearing from business leaders is if they've got staff working from home that were sent home as part of the pandemic, productivity's dipped, and that's one of the reasons why they're trying to bring everybody back into the office, because they need to increase productivity, especially with payroll going up and the big hike in minimum wage and things like that. They need to try and make sure that their staff are as productive as possible. The other side of it is there's a big issue around employees struggling with their mental health and well-being at the moment. And if they're at home, the hiring managers are saying, well, I don't know that they're not okay because I can't see them, I can't look into their eyes. And if they're in the office, I can tell immediately if somebody's not okay, and then I can have a conversation with them. They don't need to ask for help, I can tell. So part of it, I think, is a duty of care. But the other part of it is, if they've got certain employees in the business and productivity's dipped, how do you then improve that? And then the flip side is the distinguishing between what's flexible working, what's hybrid working, what's dynamic, what's agile, because everybody throws all these terms around, but does anybody actually know what they mean? And I think as well, with the new flexible working requests from day one coming in, that's throwing a spanner in the works as well, hasn't it, Marie?
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with Michelle that it's possibly a mistake to just impose a blanket, you will all return to work now approach to it. It's different for different companies, isn't it? I've got a wide range of clients, and there are certain sectors where it's very difficult to have hybrid working. You can't work from home if you're on a production line, can you? So it's horses for courses, absolutely. But certainly it's the case that if you've got staff that can do their job from home and they are faced with an employer that is insisting that everybody comes back, and there hasn't been a drop in productivity, and that's the important point, then why are you insisting? Why? and you know, when you ask that question, and I've asked it of a few company owners, managers before, and they don't really have an answer. It's just, well, they need to be back. But that's not a really good reason. You know, if you haven't had a drop in productivity and everything is going well, then why would you do that? Particularly when you're competing with other companies that do see the value of flexible working. And there's definitely a shift now. We are certainly in this country working more towards family friendly rights. It's taking time. But, you know, I remember I lived in Finland over 20 years ago, and even back then, they had it right. You know, everything was focused on family, the time off that you could take from work. The government sent you a huge box of stuff for your baby when it first arrived. It was amazing. And, you know, we're just not there, even now. But there are, you know, as you say, the flexible working regulations that have recently changed. You know, it's a step. Then we've got things like the changes to paternity leave to allow fathers a bit more flexibility with their time off. We've got the carers leave that's come in. There's definitely, you know, a shift towards recognizing that people have a life outside of work and need that time and value it as well. So as an employer, if you're offering to give more than the statutory minimum, in my experience, you'll certainly be favoured by the candidate sitting in front of you. I mean, for me, the flexible working regulations, if an employer is sticking rigidly to what the flexible working regulations require, then they're not really a flexible employer. My clients who are flexible employers are the ones that very much have a completely flexible approach. I mean, we do work in the digitech sector quite a lot, and they're very flexible. Loads of people work from home. I've got some clients who don't even have an office, and everybody works from home. Yeah, that's you know, really flexible, and they don't mind what time of day you do your job as long as it's being done. They assess productivity based on output, not whether you're sitting at your desk for 8 hours a day. You know, you can have somebody sitting at their desk for 8 hours a day and not producing as much as that person that does 3 solid hours and gets on with it. It's how different people work, isn't it? And the sooner that employers understand that and recognise that, I think the better.
Yeah, we've got a client who started banding around the term of dynamic working, and I really, really love it. And I asked them to clarify what they mean by dynamic working. And she said, we don't do a hybrid policy because that's not flexible. If you're telling somebody it's 3 days in the office, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursdays you're at home, but on Monday when you should be in the office, you've got a meeting at school, so therefore you can't be in the office, that flexibility isn't there. Similarly, when we've got a small office that we need to cover, if somebody's on holiday and then you should be on your day at home and the office isn't covered, that's not going to meet the needs of the business either. Or you might have a really important presentation that you're trying to prepare and you're going to be in the office, but you know that your door's going to be knocked on every 5 minutes and you can't get your head down and do it. So they've coined the term dynamic working. And what I really like about it is you can work wherever you need to work to meet your needs, the business needs, and your colleagues' needs. Nobody should be struggling because of the choice that you've made. So if you've got loads of work on and you've got a project and you need to be at home that day, the business is covered, the office is fine, and you need to get your head down and do it, and you know 7 hours at home that day is going to give you a head start on this project, so then you can work from home that day. If somebody's off sick, somebody's on holiday, and the office needs to be manned, and you've got no client meetings that day, and they go, right, can you work in the office that day? Absolutely fine. Or another day, you might have a meeting 2 hours away, so you base yourself from a Costa Coffee nearer where that meeting is, and everything else is okay. It's more fluid and more dynamic, and I think that is the flexibility that I think businesses need and want, and employees need and want. And I really like this term of dynamic working because I think it is something that you were saying, Marie, that is more of a flexible approach, and I think that's how businesses can do it.
And actually, sitting here, you know, describing that model, that's how we work at whole.Legal, and it's lovely. You know, generally speaking, we're all in the office on a Tuesday, so we do have that team meeting and the get together and the social interaction. But the other days of the week, you work for all of those, you know, factoring in all of those things. Where do you need to be for personal reasons? Where do you need to be for business reasons? What works for your colleagues and what works for your clients? And it works. I mean, you know, we're productive. We're a great team. We have, you know, great social interactions between ourselves, but, you know, and our clients as well. And it just works, and everybody's happy and engaged. And it's just a huge difference between being told that you've got to sit in that office and you know you've got something that you really need to be at home for just to open the door, but you've got to sit in the office even though it doesn't matter where you're sitting. Really, it's so short-sighted.
Yeah, you're similar though, aren't you, Michelle, at Pro Development?
Yeah, and it's interesting actually. So we've got a client. So yeah, we've always, literally from day one, when I set up the business, my sort of philosophy was I never wanted anybody to miss any kind of important family event, school things. I'd lost so many of those over the years. I never wanted that for anybody in the team. So I've always said I don't mind where people work as long as I know where they are from a health and safety perspective. We check in regularly. So going back to what you were saying about the, you know, people saying, oh, well, when people are working from home, you don't know how they're doing. Well, we've got teams, you know, it's like, it's not difficult to check in on people. And you can tell on a Teams call how somebody's doing if you ask the right question. So I don't really buy this, well, when they're working from home, you don't know how they're doing. That to me just means they're not having enough communication and having agreement around how they do that. You know, I always know how all the team are doing. We've got a WhatsApp group, we keep in touch via that. There's so many different things that you can do. We've also got a client, I actually quite like what they've done. So they've, rather than dynamic, they've called it smart working. So what they did was they looked at actually when are the times as a team that we need to be in person. because their big dilemma was people were working from home, but some people coming in for certain things, but then others weren't, and it was starting to create a bit of conflict. So they've just said, right, there are certain activities that we do which absolutely need to be face-to-face and in person together. So when we have those meetings or those events or those activities, then we will always do them in person. So, and the rest of the time, you work in a way that suits you and the business. So I quite liked their way of doing it, which was this smart working. That's pretty much, again, how we work. We have our meetings on a Monday, and the team are always in on a Monday because they want to have that time to catch up. But there'll be an odd occasion when one dials in on Teams, and that's fine as well. It's just about, isn't it? It's something actually that both you and Marie said that really stuck with me, was this productivity thing, which I'm always really fascinated with. Well, actually, how are people measuring productivity? Because I'm always quite interested with these people that are saying, oh, our productivity's gone down. And I think, well, I wonder how they're measuring it. And my experience when I challenge people around that is they're not really measuring it. It's a bit of a sense that they've got. And actually, when you really drill down to it, there's one or two people that aren't being productive, and it's not productivity, it's a performance issue, and we're just not dealing with that. And I think one of the challenges that we've got is people didn't deal with it before COVID and before hybrid working. There are a lot of people who struggle to have those honest conversations with people when they're struggling, when performance isn't where they want it to be. And instead of doing this kind of, so recently I spoke to a company, not a client of ours, who said, right, we've said everybody has got to come back to the office. I said, oh, well, why are you doing that? I said, well, because we've got a few people who are swinging the lead. I said, so why aren't you dealing with the ones that are swinging the lead? Instead of saying everybody, they've got about over 100 people in their company. It's having a massive implication, and again for recruitment, and it's because they're not dealing with the ones that aren't having the outputs. So for me, there's something about managers have got to get much better at being very clear on outcomes, having clear objectives, clear outcomes that they expect people to deliver against. And if they're not delivering against them, whether they're working from home or in the office, it's having those conversations to understand what support do they need to get to where they want them to be, or is there something else that is getting in the way? And people just start having those conversations in my experience.
I think you're absolutely right as well. I think in the pandemic, everybody got sent home and nobody was trained on how do you manage a virtual team. Everybody sent the staff home. And I think some of the businesses I work with, their managers were really good at performance management, one-to-ones, appraisals, personal development, coaching, mentoring, and they had great employee engagement, and their CPD with the staff was brilliant and everybody knew where they were. But there's still a lot that weren't very good at that pre-pandemic. And then when you sent everybody home, it was like, well, how do I do a one-to-one when they're not here with me? And I think this is where you're absolutely right, Michelle, where you talk to a client and they go, yes, I'm bringing everybody back because I've got 2 or 3 who productivity is down, or as you say, it's actually the performance. They're not doing what they need to be doing because they're not monitoring productivity, they're monitoring performance. They've said, I know that they log on and then watch Netflix all day. They're not actually doing any work, or they'll log on and then go to the park with the kids and come back, and things like that. So there's definitely an issue with performance management at the moment. I think a lot of hiring managers and team leaders and team managers aren't very good at managing that performance. So the decision to bring everybody back is their way of dealing with that, instead of managing those people who are not performing right and trying to get them back up to where they need to be. Or, if they shouldn't be with the business anymore, then you obviously go through that performance management and exit strategy. So I think there's definitely an issue with that. And you're absolutely right in the sense of, if you trust your people, you shouldn't need them to be back in the office. If you know that they're going to be okay on their own, at home or hybrid, or they'll come in when they need to be coming in, then let them do that. Because if you don't, you will then lose your really good people. And in the current climate, can businesses afford to lose the really, really good people they can't. They really, really can't at the moment. You know more about the performance management and the legalities of it, Marie, than I do. So what are the pitfalls with trying to do this?
Well, I think, like you're saying, it's two age-old problems, isn't it? The one is the performance management and basically the big brother approach of, well, they're swinging the lead and so we'll bring everybody back in, which is not the right approach. But then there's the other, which is the training of the managers, and that's on the employer. Because if the employer doesn't train their managers to know how to manage, then how are they expected to be able to do that? And I see this so regularly, it's quite frightening that they try and bring everybody back in and then say, well, you know, they're not performing. Well, why aren't they performing? And why isn't their manager managing their performance? You think, you know, somebody's been working in a business for 5, 6, 7 years, however long it might be, and nobody's ever said, actually, you're not performing that well, because they don't have that conversation. And this is something else I see, is that then a new manager comes in and they do know how to manage, and suddenly this person gets told, you aren't performing well, we're going to performance manage you. And what a shock that would be if they've never realised that they're not meeting the expectations. So number one, crucial to make sure that your managers know how to manage. Send them on a course. I mean, in the legal sector, it's yes, please, go see Michelle. I mean, in the legal sector, it's terrible. You get promoted up because you're good at your job, you're good at legal work, not because you're a good manager, and suddenly you're put in charge of a team of lawyers and you've got no idea how to manage people. Why on earth would you promote somebody to that role when they're good at being a lawyer? Promote them up as a lawyer, not as a manager.
It's my bugbear, is that, Marie? You see it so often, don't you? In fact, I did a podcast this week called The Rise and Fall of the Accidental Manager.
Yes.
And I think there was some research that only 17% of small and medium-sized businesses invest in leadership and management training. And you're absolutely right. Fundamentally, it comes down to training, whether the people are online, you know, working from home, in the office. Most managers have never had any training. You know, we're running a training course today. We've got 12 people from different companies, and some of them have been managing people for 6-7 years and they've never had any management training at all. So they become these accidental managers, and so I feel sorry for them because they have no idea what they're meant to be doing. It's like giving them a blank sheet of paper, isn't it? And then you've got the people that they're managing who are obviously getting impacted because they're not being managed well and supported in the right ways. So yeah.
I've got a company at the moment who have a team of staff, 6 or 7 of them, and they have a manager, and that manager's been in place a very long time. But the company keep coming to me to ask how they deal with this issue with the member of staff, and you know, their performance is still not good, and each time it's a conversation about the manager. Have you trained the manager to manage those individuals? And the answer is, well, no, but you know, he gets on with them, and well, that's all lovely, but does he know how to manage them and how to do performance reviews and one-to-ones, and is he capable of having difficult conversation? And the answer is no, he's never been trained in any of those things. And the other side of it, for an employer, they really need to think about what the consequences could be of having a manager who's never been trained in how to have those conversations, because when they haven't been trained, they can end up saying things that perhaps aren't the best things to say and result in the company finding themselves in difficulty because the individual takes offence at what's been said. It's so important for the company and for the managers so that they don't lose their confidence and self-esteem to put that training in place. And I think that's your fundamental starting point for performance management. You can't performance manage if you don't have somebody in place who knows how to do it.
Yeah. And I would add to that as well, making sure it's the right people, because we have these accidental managers. And it's one of the things we were talking about this week on the podcast that I was doing was have those, like you kind of described, Marie, there, have those two career paths for people, because not everybody will make a great manager. You might have an amazing lawyer who is absolutely got the most incredible specialist skills. We need to reward that as a career path as much as the manager. And I think because particularly we work with small and medium-sized businesses, that people think the only way to get on is to become a manager. And it shouldn't be. There should be these two routes for people as well. So yeah, I think that's a really good point you make.
I agree. And in my background of working in the corporate world as well, I saw that happen time and time again. You were amazing at what you did, and therefore they went, right, you're amazing, so have a team and make them amazing. But actually what makes you amazing sometimes is because you're quite selfish and you crack on and do your job. And the traits that make you amazing at your job do not then necessarily lend themselves to you being a manager. Some of the best managers I've worked with were average at recruitment, but were amazing managers because they had the empathy and they had the compassion and they had the understanding, and they would give you the time and they would go through things and they would coach and mentor you and things like that. But because they did all of that, they weren't then high-flying recruiters because they were giving their team more time. But the high-flying recruiters didn't have time for anybody else. That's what made them amazing recruiters. But to give them a team, what that happened is, A, they weren't very good at managing the team, so they were losing the staff because the team weren't feeling supported and the managers were snapping at them and shouting at them and kicking off and, you know, all that kind of thing. So the employee engagement was down and, you know, those disengaged employees were leaving. But also that manager who was a number one in their field suddenly didn't have time to do all of that, and therefore their fee earning was reduced, and therefore they weren't billing what they used to bill as well. So the business was struggling in that way. And, you know, and I've seen that in the corporate world. So the accidental manager thing is something that does fundamentally need to change. The other side of that as an accidental manager is where you have a family-owned business, and I've got a client, family-owned business. The director brought his daughter into the business and she became a manager because she was his daughter, and it was by default. But actually the employees within the business were disgruntled because she wasn't very good and she didn't understand enough about the business because she'd just been brought in and put in this role. They were then having to try and show her what to do. There was conflict there, but they couldn't go to the director and say, we have an issue, because that was the daughter. So, you know, I think the accidental manager in family-run businesses is even harder to deal with because it's by default, because you're a daughter, a son, a wife, a nephew, whatever it might be. And that's the other difficult side. If you're an employee working in that environment, that's a challenge as well.
I would agree.
How do we feel about the personal development of staff at the moment? Because over the last 12 months, this post-pandemic kind of recovery, bumpy road that we've been on, I think a lot of organisations had a really bumpy year in 2022. You know, that bounce back was quite phenomenal for quite a number of organisations. And then last year, a lot of them were sort of coming back down from that and had a bumpy road. And economically, we've had this technical recession. We've had the Bank of England looking at the interest rates. We've had trying to bring inflation down, waiting to see when the election was going to be called, which obviously we now know when that's going to be. I found a lot of clients that we've been working with have halted spend on certain things, and part of that has been on that training and development of the staff, because they've been hunkering down going, we've just got to get through this next 12 months and we're not spending unnecessarily. And one of the things that tends to fall by the wayside when we're in these difficult economic situations is training and development of the staff. Have you noticed that?
I have to some extent. Sorry, Michelle. I have to some extent. I've and it's always one of the first things along with the marketing budget, isn't it? But I think, you know, some training you could probably put on hold, but that fundamental training, if you're going to promote somebody up, training for management purposes and training for skills, if you move somebody into a new role, you can't cut corners on those kind of things. No.
And I would say it's been really mixed for us. Obviously, we do loads of training and development. So we've had some clients who have kind of really gone for it. It's almost like, and certainly through COVID, it was fascinating in COVID. Lots of people like shut the doors and like, no, we're not going to do anything. When actually, if anything, that was the time that people needed most support. And then, of course, what happened is after COVID, we had the Great Resignation because people just took that and thought, do you know what, my company is not supporting me, they're not communicating with me, I'm not being developed, I'm going to go somewhere else. And again, it's interesting, in this research from McKinsey, they highlighted another main reason people were leaving organisations was because they weren't being developed, they didn't have any growth and development. So we've got a real mix. We've got some clients who are really going for it and not letting things stop them, and quite right too, because you know, your people are your most important thing in your business. We don't have a business without our people. But definitely we've seen a lot of our businesses have been impacted by the economy. So of course, you know, people are being more cautious, and I completely understand that. We're finding most people are still doing a bit of something, but not doing as much as they were doing before. And it's understandable, but I think at the moment there's a big risk in doing that. If you don't develop your people, if you're not supporting them, having those career conversations and supporting them with their aspirations, of course they're going to assume that there is no opportunity and they will go elsewhere. So what's been really fascinating, we run a leadership program, a 7-month leadership program, and quite a few companies at the moment are using that almost like as a bit of a talent opportunity, you know, for people that they're seeing they've got that opportunity, they're seeing they've got that potential, and they're putting them on the programme to support them with that journey. And to me, that is the best way to do it, is support people, to give them that opportunity, because you'll get a much more rounded person, even if leadership isn't what they want to do in the long term. But, you know, to me, everybody should be leading. So, you know, really supporting people in, are they leading themselves? Do they need to lead others, and are they leading the organisation as well? So yeah, it's important, but yeah, it's definitely been a bumpy ride the last couple of years.
And I think
go on, sorry Marie, go on.
I was just going to say, I think it's something that employers are finding candidates are far more interested in. I've had a few conversations in the last 6 months, 12 months, where employers who are you know, managing interviews are surprised that candidates are asking them what they can do for them. What are they offering? What flexibility, what benefits, what training, progression, career opportunities. And they're sort of taken aback that that's the direction of travel of the interview, rather than them being grilled on, you know, their skills and what they're bringing to the company. There's a definite shift where it's more of a two-way conversation now, and some, you know, your more traditional employers are perhaps not quite there yet with understanding that that's how things are now.
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot when we register our candidates and we're interviewing them and we're asking what's important to you in this next opportunity. For them, it's what's the culture like, what's the training and development like, that ongoing personal development. Some of them don't want to run the company, but they still want to know that investment in their personal development is going to happen. They want to know what the benefits are, that flexibility in the working styles, what the people are like, what their values are, and what's the vision for the business. And really importantly at the moment, what difference will this person make in the job and in the company? And I think going back to what you said at the very beginning, Michelle, we're looking at the generational side of things. One of the really interesting facts that I've been told is there's a high proportion of Gen Z who start thinking about their next opportunity within 72 hours of starting a new job, which is frightening. But the reason for that is, if an organisation doesn't get that onboarding process right from day one, this new employee who lives in a world where everything's at their fingertips and everything is now, will be thinking about another interview that they had or a different job offer that they had, and is the grass going to be greener? Because if they're not getting everything that they want from your business from day one, they probably will leave quite quickly. So I think that's really important for businesses to think about. And you're absolutely right, Marie. Most candidates now are interviewing the company, and a lot of employers are forgetting that it is a two-way interview. It's not just you interviewing that candidate to see if you want to hire them. They're interviewing you to see if they want to work for you. And we had an example of that. So one of our clients is a very small business in the area, and the owner wanted to recruit somebody into the team. They'd tried to put an advert out themselves on Facebook. They'd hired somebody, but hadn't interviewed them properly. Hired them because they thought, oh, so-and-so knows them. And after a couple of weeks, it turned out they weren't at the right level. They weren't capable of doing the role that they'd hired them for. So they came to us to help them recruit. But actually what we did for them was go a little bit further. And I sat in on the interviews with them, and I interviewed the candidates along with the owner of the business. If we use the term accidental manager again for him, he set up this business on his own originally and then grew it, and suddenly he's a manager of however many people, but has never been on any training because it was him that set this business up. So, he's learning as he goes along to manage the business and manage a team of people, but has never been trained on how you interview somebody either. So to interview somebody to do a job that he doesn't know how to do either was where he was struggling. So I sat in on the interviews with him, and by the time we got to the last interview, because he interviewed 4 or 5 people, he sat there and said, I would never have offered the person that I've offered to the job had you have not done that with me, because the types of questions that you were asking them, I wouldn't have known how to ask those questions. He said, and also you've given them the chance to ask me questions, and we've built up a really, really good rapport. I've got a better understanding of them and they've got a better understanding of me. And ultimately they found the right person. And I think that is really, really important. And a lot of employers who don't recruit very often or haven't recruited for such a long time still think of that interview process as a one-way street, but actually you end up with the wrong person in the business if you get that wrong.
I do have a lot of sympathy for small companies where, one person has built the company up, like you say, and they are expected to be a jack of all trades. They start employing staff, and suddenly they're expected to know how to interview, how to recruit, how to manage, how to deal with grievances and disciplinaries and pay reviews and all of these things that they're supposed to know, and all the basics of employment law. I have updates in my inbox almost without fail every day on some small thing, some case decision that changes something small, or how on earth are they expected to stay on top of everything? I do have a lot of sympathy for small businesses, but that's where, investing in having the right support around you is invaluable, isn't it?
Yeah. We were talking about that this week, how it can be really lonely being a managing director of a small business, but there's amazing people around us. I wouldn't be sat here, with my business the way it is had I not leant on and got support from experts in different areas. I'm an expert in people, but I've got an amazing accountant, we've got an amazing lawyer. You have those people around you, great recruitment people. Make sure you have those people around you. And I think the big thing for me at the moment is that I think people maybe haven't totally clocked is that we more than ever now need to be employers of choice.
Yeah.
There is such a candidate market now. As you were saying, Marie, people are interviewing the company now as well, because actually they've got choices. So we have to, as companies, we need to set ourselves apart by offering those opportunities, by letting them know they'll have regular one-to-ones, that they've got training and development, that will support the career, that we've got flexibility in how we work. So I think there's a big focus that businesses need to do now. It's interesting, isn't it? We've always been in the past, how do we make ourselves attractive to new customers? It's like now we need to be doing just the same. How do we make ourselves attractive to Gen Z? Because I've had 3 conversations this week with 3 different employers about Gen Z and about young people joining workplaces, and we're in this really unique situation, aren't we, that we've never had so many generations in the workplace. We've got one employer that's got an 80-year-old still working for them and a 17-year-old. You know, the generational differences are huge, and I'm hearing a lot of employers talking about like the working from home. Well, I never did that. I never needed to do that. And why do they have all these demands, and why do they need a sense of purpose? I just was told you had to work hard and then you would get on. And so we've got these really different generations, and there's a great, I don't know if you've seen it or not, there's a brilliant interview with Simon Sinek about the millennials. If you get a chance to watch it, it's really great. He talks a lot about how that generation have been really let down by so many people, by the education, probably by parenting and not having really clear boundaries, by having everything at their fingertips, and if they want it, they get it tomorrow. So they've not learned patience. They're starting a job and they're already wanting to know, well, when am I going to get promoted and how can I? So we've got to find a way to support them, and there's got to be a coming together of that. It's not about that sort of our generation going, well, these young people need to just get with the program, because no, that we need to help support them, but we need to get with the program. We've got to move towards them as well and try and understand their world. And that sense of purpose, Kelly, that you mentioned, that also featured really highly in this McKinsey report as well, that people are looking more than ever for that sense of purpose. So I was talking to somebody recently who does holiday lets, and I was telling him the story of the famous NASA story, where the cleaner gets stopped by the president, and he says, what's your job? And he doesn't say, oh, I'm just the cleaner. He says, I help man get to the moon. So he had that real sense of purpose. This guy was like, oh, well, that's all right if you're NASA, isn't it? That's exciting. I just do holiday lets. And I was like, well, that's not very inspiring, is it? If you're telling your team, well, we just do holiday lets, they're not going to have. But actually, what you're doing is creating these incredible experiences that people and families will talk about for years to come, and they'll recall that, and they save up all the money and they go and they want this lovely holiday experience. That's what you're doing. And you can see the penny drop. But I think that's what we need to do in our businesses at the moment, is if we want to be this employer of choice, we've got to have an exciting vision. Where are we trying to get to? What we're trying to do? What is our purpose? What difference are we making in the world? And help our people connect to that, because sticking it on a wall. So I was with an employer yesterday who was saying, oh, well, we'll have it on a screen. We'll put it on their screen so they see it every day. And it's like, well, it's just words. They've got to be connected to it. So how are you really finding a way to connect people to that sense of purpose? I think that's really important at the moment.
I think you're absolutely right. I know when I set up KD Recruitment, having come from the corporate world where you're told what you can and can't do and what you should and shouldn't do, I wasn't allowed any free reign on LinkedIn. I could have LinkedIn, but heaven forbid I should post an opinion. Wasn't allowed. I could just share what the company was doing. And then when I set up this business, I was like, right, I'm going to do things differently, and there will be this vision. And very quickly, I started talking about, actually what we do is we change people's lives. That's what we do. Nobody looks for a new job because they're in a really positive mindset. You look for a new job because you've been made redundant, or you might be being bullied at work, or you've been overlooked for a promotion, or the culture's bad, or there's lots of different reasons. But you don't come to me because you're feeling great about your job and what you're doing, you're going to stay where you are if you're in that position. So I spend a lot of time, and my team spend a lot of time, building the confidence back up in our candidates to make them believe that they can achieve anything and they can see what they're capable of. So when they find that next opportunity, whether that's a receptionist role, or you're a HR director, or you're doing some transformational change work, whatever that might be, they feel empowered to go and do that. And so therefore we change people's lives. But ultimately, we're changing the lives of the business owners and the business leaders as well, because by getting the right people in their team, that's going to help the business grow, the business move forward. And I think it is about thinking about, well, what is your vision and what do you want to achieve? And what's your legacy piece? You know, what is it that you want people to know you for? What do you want to be famous for? If somebody looked at your social media and looked into your company and things like that and say, well, what am I going to know you for? And that cleaner for NASA is, I help people get to the moon. That's what you need to think about.
That's one of the most rewarding parts, I think, of my job is when I'm going into a business and doing a bit of an audit on how they do things with their staff and what they could do with doing better, perhaps. And we sit down and, and if it's a business that has grown organically, it's maybe a family business, and now they have a lot of people there who aren't family anymore. And it's a bit of a shock to the system because, people complain about something and, but, we sit down with them and we go through everything and find what it is that they understand and what they don't understand, and we get all the basics in place. And it's really lovely to see that once they understand those basics and how to implement them, and they train their supervisors and so on, and delegate down that responsibility, because often you see that the business owner is still the one that's managing everybody. They daren't trust their staff to manage everybody else. Once you get the basics in place, the business is so much happier and the employees are engaged. And I think employee engagement, that is, it's a buzzword, I don't know, but it's true. If you get your employee engagement right and your culture right and your basics right about management, then it's a recipe for success in most cases, I would say.
Yeah. No, I would agree, because it's fundamental, isn't it, to everything that the three of us do, isn't it? If you've got great employee engagement, you attract the right candidates, you find people that are really fully aligned, which is what Kelly's doing, Marie, with what you're doing. They've got all those foundations in place, they're supporting people legally and in all that side of things. I'm obviously hugely passionate about employee engagement, whether it's a buzzword or not. It's the fact. And it was interesting, Marie, right at the beginning, you talking about Finland, because a lot of the Scandinavian countries, they are massively brilliant at employee engagement compared to the UK. We are way behind a lot of other countries and continue to be so. I'm the area network ambassador for Engage for Success in our region, and this, we're still having the same conversations 12 years on about how we've got a real lack of employee engagement in the UK. And it isn't rocket science. We talk about NASA, it isn't rocket science. A lot of this stuff it's not easy to get it right, and people don't always know where to start, but it's so important. If you don't have an engaged people, engaged managers, if you don't have an engaged manager, it's highly unlikely you're going to have an engaged team. If your management team, it's interesting when we do staff surveys, we measure engagement in the business. Actually, sometimes it's the senior leadership team that are the least engaged. And again, it's a shock for them, like, oh, how come we're so low? Well, I don't know, you tell me, what's going on. And you start to get underneath the skin of that, and they've got some real issues in how they're working, conflict, misunderstandings. A lot of them, again, accidental managers. They've never done anything as a team together. They've not developed as a team. They've not grown. They've just been promoted. So yeah, employee engagement is, if you want to be an employer of choice, you've definitely got to have an engaged workforce. Otherwise, you're never going to be, because we've got some of our clients who are really high engagement and they never struggle to recruit. because everybody talks about how amazing the company is. So, it's that kind of advocacy, isn't it? Again, we look for customer advocacy. We need to be looking for employee advocacy now as well, because they'll go out, they'll say, how great the company is. They'll also do the reverse. It's that Friday night, oh, you won't believe what our company's done now kind of conversations that end up limiting the amount of talent that comes your way, because people know that reputation. I always say Yorkshire's a small village. Everybody does, don't they?
I think it's the analogy that I always think about. If you go out to a restaurant and have a bad meal, you will tell everybody that you've had a bad meal. If you go to a restaurant and have an amazing meal with amazing service, you might only tell one person. So it's harder to do things well and have that self-promotion, but it is so easy when things go wrong for everybody to know about it. And I just think getting that employee engagement right and looking after your people, was it Richard Branson who said, look after your people and they will look after your customers? I think that's absolutely true. And for me, any business who doesn't focus on the people is not going to grow and develop and move forward. So the employee engagement piece to become an employer of choice is absolutely right. We ask the question with every client that we work with, what makes this a great place to work? And if they can't answer that question, then I actually tell them to go away and ask their people and say, well, you need to be asking them that question, because if you can't answer it, how engaged are your people, and is it actually a good place to work? Because if it's not, you're hiring at the wrong time then, because you're not going to keep hold of your new employees either.
And it comes down to communication and transparency as well. The businesses, over 20 years of working with businesses, you see those where they talk to their staff and get their staff's input in the business plans, what they're going to do, the changes that they want to make, and so on. And those that bother to involve their staff and see it as an important part of any process tend to have far better results than the cloak and dagger approach, and the telling, this is what we're going to do. Nobody bothered to ask the staff whether that was a good idea. They're the people on the ground doing the job. But in any process as well. So even things like redundancy processes, as horrible as they are, the more open and communicative you are with staff about the reasons why it's happening, and asking them about ways that they think that it can be avoided if it is something that's possible to avoid, and maybe you haven't thought of something, maybe they've got some great ideas there on the shop floor but you've never asked, and that transparency and communication, it does a lot for employee engagement, even in adverse situations.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people don't focus on communicating to their people. We do every quarter, I have 90-day planning sessions with the team where we close the office. We do it every quarter. To me, it's the non-negotiable. We always do it. It's about us all being clear on what we're focusing on in the next quarter, celebrating success, working together to work out what we want to do next. And I get some companies who go, we'll do that once a year. They'll say, oh no, we can't do that. That's huge. That's too expensive. And I think you can't afford not to do it.
No. It's the same with them. We've been doing a huge amount of acquisition jobs, transactional jobs for clients just recently, and the 2P process, when generally speaking, if the buyer of a business is involved in those communications with the staff in the target business, they get far better engagement down the line once the completion's taken place, and the staff are far less frightened of this new company taking over. And I've seen some really good success stories of late where the seller has allowed the buyer to come in and talk to staff and let them ask them the questions directly, because the seller doesn't necessarily know what the buyer plans to do post completion, and just let them come in and meet them. And it far better results when there's openness, transparency and communication between all the parties than if you tell the staff on the day before it happens and then suddenly the next day they come into work and somebody else owns the business.
Yeah, think that's something I've seen quite a bit, where you speak to somebody and they say to me, oh, the business has been taken over, I don't like the new culture, I don't like the new management team, it's completely different, and blah blah blah. And like you say, it's because the new buyers have come in and it's been announced, right, as of tomorrow, this is your new boss. And people don't like change. We're creatures of habit. We don't like change. So you have to do it in a process that people can accommodate those small changes as the process goes on. You know, if we go back to the pandemic, which we've already spoken about, I know so many people who kicked off when they were getting sent home to work from home. They're like, oh my God, I can't work from home. Oh my God, this is horrific. Business owners going, how do I send my people home? This is not something we've ever done before. And it was just a nightmare for the first month. And then, you know, you fast forward 4 years and these employers are trying to get their employees back in the office, and the employees are going, oh my God, I can't go back in the office. Oh my God, I don't like this change. And it is because the communication's not been done right. I mean, the pandemic, obviously we couldn't, not that we didn't see it coming, we did. I think everybody was burying their head in the sand. But the quickness of that, everybody getting sent home, that necessarily couldn't have been avoided. But everything that's been happening since can be avoided if you talk to your people and ask their opinion. Now, whether you take their opinion, that's different. You might not be able to, but I think your employees feeling listened to, and then you as an employee being able to ask questions of what's going on, and that two-way communication, I think, is really, really important with any change that you need to make within your business, whether that is that you're selling the business, or you're bringing in a new senior leadership team, or you are making redundancies, or you're talking about the new vision for the future, which is what you talked about, Michelle. Whatever it is, communication is really, really important, and people are more willing to come along on that journey if they feel that they've been talked to and listened to, and they've been part of that decision-making process.
There's a great, I don't know if you've come across it, there's a great model by a guy called Cotter, who looked at how do you help people through change. And it's interesting because most people realise and think about communication, but that's actually step 4.
Yeah.
There's 3 steps before that, and one of them is, you know, what's the sense of urgency? Why are we making this change? You know, so many people have no idea why this is happening. There's this kind of bringing together of people. There's then step 3 is creating a vision for change, which is what we've already been talking about. You know, you can't expect people to move and change towards something if they don't know what that towards something looks like. So actually helping them to do that. So I can really see, Marie, how that would work with bringing in a new business owner, because they can actually share a bit of that vision for change, can't they, which will really help to get that buy-in with people.
And they get the relationship built up as well, you know, also crucial. You know, your manager's having a good relationship with the staff, and if the buyer in that scenario can go in and meet the key members of staff, or even the whole team if it's not a huge business, and really get that relationship built up and have a good conversation about what they would like to see in the new business and so on, you can really get people on board, even if they are scared to death of the fact that, you know, somebody else is going to be owning it and it's going to be completely different from what they've done for 10-20 years. If they've been there a long time, you can see how a new owner would be a scary prospect. It's and involving people in the change, it's crucial.
And there's so much change, I think, isn't there, coming as well now in our world as it stands with AI and everything else that people are talking about at the moment, technical, digital. It is so important that we keep helping people to move towards that change, because I think people are scared, they don't know what it looks like, and it's about being open and transparent with people about what we know as well, and encouraging people to explore more.
And offer training. We were talking about training before, but you know, you can't expect, it's like, as I've seen in the past, moving somebody who's always worked in the storeroom to work on the till. And you know, maybe they have a disability and they've been in the storeroom all that time because they are not good at working on the till. They have, you know, reasons why they shouldn't be on there, and they get put on there, and suddenly they're failing miserably at their role and find themselves out. And then the company faces a tribunal claim. It doesn't work for anybody, does it? It's, you know, but managers need to understand about the skills of their staff and assessing what skill set they have, and not moving them into a role that they can't do. It's the same with a manager being promoted up to be a manager. And I've seen this where their KPIs change and suddenly management style KPIs become a huge factor in whether they get that bonus that they've been getting every year successfully at maximum level because they're brilliant at that job. Suddenly they're managing the team that does that job and they're not having the time to do that job themselves so much, and their bonus is now focused on these factors that they've never been trained to do, and they're not getting the bonus anymore. They're so disgruntled, and then you end up with the settlement agreement and people leaving. It's very short-sighted to not train your staff properly and assess skill sets properly.
And I think that we've covered all of that and it keeps coming full circle. If we think back to the beginning of this podcast and we were talking about flexibility in working and actually talking to your employees and looking at what's important to them, what's important to your business, that links in with the training and development of your people, your managers, listening to them. What do they want? What's important to them? What's important to you and your business? Getting the right legal basics in place. But again, talking to everybody, what's right for the business, get those basics right, make sure that you've got the right people coming in to support you as a business owner. It's all about people and communication. Everything we've talked about today is about the communication and listening and taking advice, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Ultimately, we all want the same things, don't we? We all want to be happy.
Yeah.
and whether it's the managing directors, if you have an engaged workforce, you're doing all those things that help engage them, it makes your life easier, you're happier, your leadership team are happier, your people are happier. That's what we all want fundamentally, isn't it? And of course the success then comes off the back of that.
Yeah. And it's not fighting, it's accepting the support, realizing that getting the specialist help, whether it is coaching in learning and development and leadership and what have you, or whether it's getting your legals right, or whether it's getting the recruitment right, it's understanding that investing in those things at the outset can mean the difference between failure and success, and people often scrimp on those things because they're focusing on the day job and the budgets are limited, but I don't think they're the right things to be moving your budget away from. They should be moving the budget towards those kind of things to make sure that they get it right at the outset.
Absolutely.
And it can be that difference as well, can't it, from being good and being great? Because actually a lot of our clients come to us and say, well, we're all right, we're not doing bad, and they are all right. But a client came in recently and he was doing all right, but he's invested in some employee engagement, he's invested in developing 2 of his senior guys who are now going to become directors. And he said, you've supercharged the business. Which is lovely, but that's the difference, isn't it? Do you want to be just coasting along, or do you want supercharging? My business has been supercharged because I've had really great people helping me with that. So it's that difference to me, isn't it? Do you just want to cruise, or do you want to supercharge and really do something incredible with your business? And that's the difference, I think.
And you do have a very lovely team, Michelle.
I'm very lucky.
You are.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know what? It's been amazing speaking to you two today. I think we could sit here and do this for hours. But no, I just want to thank you both so much for today's podcast. It's been really, really interesting and very insightful. I hope everybody who's listening has taken some inspiration from all the different things that we've spoken about, and listen in for future podcasts that will be coming up in the near future. So thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you, Kelly.